We are going to continue to talk about the assessment that you're developing this week, but before we do that, if you haven't already done so, I would encourage you to very soon be delivering the assessment that you developed for this module. You're going to need time to reflect and evaluate, as well as actually just write up your submission. So you do really need to be getting on and doing that ASAP. So with all assessments, we would expect a distribution of marks. And in the ideal situation, that distribution curve will have most of the students sitting in the sort of pass to good pass bracket. So let's say like 55 to 65%. A small number will be at the minimum pass level, and perhaps some not even actually achieving that pass mark. And then you'll also have a small number at the other end of the spectrum with significantly higher marks, so upwards of 75–80%. This distribution of marks is one of the indicators that we would use to see if our assessment has been pitched at the right level. So if you've got a large number of students failing to meet the pass mark, that might suggest that the assessment is expecting more from the students than we realistically should be. On the other hand, if all your students are receiving really high pass marks, your assessment might need to be adjusted just to present a greater challenge to the class. There are, of course, other reasons for distribution of marks, and definitely not forgetting the standard of teaching. The assessment might be completely appropriate, but if the students haven't received the necessary learning materials, they're not going to be able to meet the pass mark. For the purpose of this module, we're focusing on the assessment itself. There are some assessments, particularly within the clinical field, that actually might require 100% pass. So a classic example of that would be an assessment of infection control procedures. This would be a practical assessment and probably an OSCE. But there's no gradient for how well a student can complete a procedure like that. It's either correct or it's not. If a student misses a step or completes a step incorrectly, then the whole process is void. So in that situation, it's completely reasonable to have a 100% pass mark. Or probably a better way of phrasing that would be a pass-fail situation. The feedback would be the most important thing. So if a student fails, they need to know exactly where they've gone wrong and then be directed to how to fix that. Putting a numerical point on it isn't really of any value to them. Sometimes the issue when a large proportion of students perform badly or poorly in the assessment is actually the question. So as educators, when we write assessments, we generally start with an idea of what we want to get from the students, so the answer, if you like. And from there, we write a question to try and elicit that answer. But because we've already got the answer in our mind, it can be really easy for us to overlook the detail of the question. So really what I'm saying is, we don't always word the question very well. And that in turn can lead to a student not being clear on what we're actually asking. And if they don't know what we're asking, then we can't expect them to answer it well. And a really good way to overcome that issue is by using peer review. I always ask, ideally a group of my colleagues, to review my assessment question before I give them the marking scheme. And I ask them how they would answer that question. And that tells me if I'm being clear enough in my request. It can be really difficult to see the ambiguities when we've written the whole question and answer, but an external opinion will easily pick up on that. The other thing that would be included sort of within that peer review process is having a second marker. Now, different institutions have different policies with regards to second marking, and it may be that your overarching regulatory body has a standard or a policy for second marking that might overarch one that your university has. So have a look at that and think about whether that second marker is being used appropriately to make sure that what you're asking the students is reasonable in terms of what you're expecting to get from them.